Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump.
We begin with Morning Joe this morning on MSNBC. That's their morning show over there still. Joe and Mika. These are two people who are consistently wrong, like on a daily basis, on a news program, on a news network. But somehow they still have some credibility with their audience because, well, they hate Trump so much and they call Trump Hitler so much that their audience can't get enough of it. That's why it's kind of curious that they announced this morning to that very same audience some surprising news.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful. He was upbeat. He seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Why wouldn't we indeed? I've got more here, and we're going to keep going with this, but I want to interject really quickly here. These two are so fake. They're so fraudulent. They're as fake and as disingenuous as Mika's eye makeup. I'm sorry, I hate to be gratuitously mean or anything, but seriously, what is going on? She looks like Tim Curry in Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's just an odd look. This whole thing is scripted. It's been pre-vetted and pre-planned. It's on teleprompter. They probably practiced it in their bathroom mirror before they came on the air. It comes across as disingenuine, insincere. And yes, given the fact that they've called Donald Trump Hitler and you a Nazi for the last several years, one does ask the question, why are you reaching out to try to talk to Donald Trump? And here's the other thing that I think shouldn't be lost on anybody. These guys are just two morning show hosts on a cable news network. Why are they acting? She's comparing herself to her father, who was the national security advisor under President Jimmy Carter. By the way, great job. You know, the man who engineered the Iranian hostage crisis and the Soviet Union rolling into Afghanistan. Your dad was a stud there, Mika. He really kicked tail. But yeah, thanks for comparing you going to talk to Donald Trump with your dad's work with the Ayatollah. You're not helping your case here if that's your goal. But the fact that we have grave concerns about deportations and about inflicting retribution against members of the media and against political opponents. So we're going to go down as a special envoy. Who the hell do you think you are? The self-importance and gratuitous, it's nauseating to see. Like they're in some way special or important. That's it, Mika. You know what? It's on us. We've got to go down there and heal the nation. and finally to have a conversation. It's been 7 years and the time is enough. And I'm sure Donald Trump doesn't lay in bed staring at the ceiling saying, I wonder when Joe and Mika will come visit me again. But they're acting like that's what he does. All right, so she just asked the rhetorical question. For those of you who are wondering, why would we do that? The question is, why wouldn't we? Well, okay, that's not really an answer, though, is it?
Wait. 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
So Joe and I decided it was time to do something different. Okay, I've got a suggestion, Mika. Actually, I think it's a good idea. You know, given the fact that you have been complete and total utter failures when it comes to analyzing the political scene in America and giving any kind of perspective or analysis or context into the daily events of this country. For God's sake, Joe just realized, like last week, that butter was expensive in the grocery store. After the election, it like was remember we did that segment right here on this show. So listen, you're right. You do need to do something different. I have a suggestion. I have a humble suggestion, something that you and Joe can do that will be different. Why don't you do an informative and entertaining morning news program? Not a political activist show, not a grievance show, not a bunch of people sitting around a table acting like they're smarter than the rest of us, telling us what's going on in the world and then being consistently wrong because you're so out of touch in your bubble. How about you try to do something different? How about you listen to your audience? How about you listen to those who have left you and are no longer in your audience? Why don't you actually, instead of telling us what you think is going to happen or what should happen, why don't you actually spend some time on your news program telling the audience what did happen? That would be different. And instead of lecturing all of us about how disappointed you are with the choices we make, how about instead you just stick to news, information, education, and entertainment? Well, you won't be surprised to learn that Joe and Mika did not take my advice. Here's what they decided to do different.
As somebody close to Donald Trump told me this past weekend, this is a president who's not seeking re-election. So maybe, just maybe, now could be the time for both parties to get to work. And I know, given the jarring headlines that we read every day, that may seem like a stretch. But think about this. Of the 150 million votes cast, Donald Trump got 50%. Kamala Harris got about 49%. So I don't know. Seems to make sense for leaders of both parties to seek common ground if it's possible at all. And I will tell you, a lot of Democratic leaders we've talked to this past week since the election have told Mika and me it's time for a new approach. And when I say top Democrats, I mean top Democrats. They said, we're open. And this was before we talked to Donald Trump. They said, listen, we're open to working with the incoming president if the incoming president is open to working with us.
Yeah. This is amazing. And listen, there's more to this, okay? And I'm going to give you my analysis and opinion on it in a bit. I want you to get all this, but it's worth pausing here and noting the sanctimonious hubris that you get from these people. And if it's true, the top Democrats are now saying we're open to working with the president. He's open to working with us. You called him Hitler. You called him a fascist. You called us racist, xenophobic Nazis. You impeached him twice over nothing. You sicked the Justice Department on him. You sicked special prosecutors on him. You sicked the DA of Manhattan on him on trumped-up, made-up charges. You sicked the DA of Fulton County, Georgia on him on trumped up, made up charges. You've lied about him consistently. You funded the Russian collusion hoax and the Russian Steele dossier, made up out of nothing, and then paralyzed his first administration with lies about Russian collusion. And now, and you tried to keep him off of the ballot so that he couldn't even run for president. And now you are willing to work with him if he's willing to work with you. All right, so that means all the things that you said about him, obviously, you're now admitting was complete and total bullshit. Because if all that stuff you said about him is true, why in the hell would you want to work with him? So thank you for conceding that for the last 8+ years, you have been completely and totally full of shit. Let's start there. Why don't you say that? Why don't you come forward and say it? You know, it's an amazing thing. If you look at the biblical recipe for forgiveness and atonement, Old Testament and to a certain degree, the New Testament, there is a formula for acknowledging your sin and having that sin forgiven. But the first thing is you need to identify it personally and say, here's where we were wrong. And it's not incumbent on Trump to say, you know what, it's time to work together. So let me start by saying all the things I did wrong. No. He won. You want to work with him, you step up and you say, we were wrong. This is what we did that was wrong. And we are sorry that we did that. And we would like to make up for it. Oh, also, by the way, biblically, you're supposed to make a sincere confession that you are going to not do it again. Good luck with that. Does anyone believe them? You know, the last person who walked into Donald Trump's office during a presidential transition, acting like he was his friend, extending a hand, saying, cooperation, I want to work with you. His name was James Comey. He was the director of the FBI, and the entire meeting was the premise of a setup. Trump's smarter than all of this. And like I said, I've got more analysis coming up in a moment, but the hubris, the unmitigated, sanctimonious hubris of them saying, these Democrats, they're willing to work with him. I mean, you know, you won the election. Maybe we need to try something different. So what do you mean try something different? So everything up until this point has just been a tactic to win. Then admit that. Admit that you were wrong. Otherwise, all you're doing is sitting here telling us that you want to work with Hitler. Listen, he's Hitler, but, you know, we got to get something done around here.
Yeah, the question is, though, how do we get there? Hyperbole and personal attacks will not work. My hair on fire doesn't work. We've all seen that. What also does not work is threatening political opponents with arrest, harassment, and even jail. That is a failed path. Recent history has proven that impeachments and trials turn those on trial into political martyrs and only make them more popular with the American people. Just ask Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. We know this will be a consequential presidency. The question is whether it will be constructive. It will take a new approach from all sides, from both parties, and a leader who can bring them together. And only time will tell if Donald Trump is that leader. As for us, we also let him know that we will continue to speak truth to power and push back hard when called for, as we have with all presidents.
I'm sorry. These two speaking truth to power and pushing back as they've done with all presidents. This is the guy who just 4 months ago told you that Joe Biden was at the top of this game, that this is the best Joe Biden in the history of Joe Bidens. Oh, you know, whoever is the target of an impeachment or a prosecution, they end up being a martyr and a hero. No, Mika, only when the charges are complete and total, say it with me, bullshit. That's when the American people sift through the evidence and decide, no, you're going after him for political purposes, not for that. Trust me, if there are prosecutions for the people who broke the law under Donald Trump, the American people will be 100% on board for that. They're scared. Democrats are scared. Yeah, I wonder if this had happened if Matt Gaetz hadn't been named the prospective attorney general. I mean, Matt Gaetz gets named attorney general, and I think everybody in D.C. was like, "Oh my God, he's serious. Trump is serious. He's really going to come after us." And so they're running scared. This is a sign of weakness. But still, hold on tight because you might be surprised by my ultimate analysis of this entire charade. But let's let them finish up.
Don't be mistaken. We're not here to defend or normalize Donald Trump. We're here to report on him and to hopefully provide you insights that are going to better equip all of us in understanding these deeply unsettling times. And I am reminded of what Marty Baron, legendary editor, told his Washington Post reporters back in the first term. We're not going to war. We're going to work.
Yeah, sure. The Washington Post had set up their entire newsroom to cover the Russian collusion hoax. It was a fake story. And they did go to war, and they continue to go to war. They're not there to report on Donald Trump. They're there, well, to save their butts. Not just legally, potentially, for all of the lies that have been told for years and years and years, but also, let's be clear, MSNBC is hemorrhaging viewers, hemorrhaging money. Here's a quick look at the last week's ratings in prime time. I don't have the morning numbers, but CNN is beating them. CNN is beating them. And don't even get us started on Fox News. Look at the numbers there. I mean, it's remarkable when you look at Chris Hayes, right? 77 share or 77 rating, excuse me. And Waters has 568. These are millions of households. I mean, even Anderson Cooper is beating MSNBC, right? This is pathetic. This is worse than pathetic. You swing over to the weekend numbers, just as bad, if not worse. Oh, who's shocked that Al Sharpton isn't doing well against just, basic CNN newsroom? Jonathan Capehart. This is ugly. This is bad. They're in trouble. They're in big trouble. And I guess their play is, well, if we can secure a one-on-one interview with Donald Trump, that finally will have ratings here. And they're right. For one day, everyone will tune in for the freak show aspect of Donald Trump owning Mika and Joe. I have no doubt about it. But is that how you fix what's broken over there on MSNBC? No way. And this gambit of trying to act like they're magnanimous and trying to build bridges, and they're here to try to find a new way here after 8 years of nonsense from Joe and Mika on MSNBC. It might actually end up having, ironically, a boomerang effect. Brian Stelter over at CNN, who, by the way, let's face it, he's a clown and a potato, and he has every reason to try to knock down MSNBC just for the benefit of the network he works for, CNN. However, I believe this reporting, loyal morning show viewers are furious about the Trump meeting. Jeff Jarza has called it a, quote, betrayal of their colleagues, democracy, and us all. It is a disgusting show of obeisance in advance. Some fans are vowing not to watch the show anymore. That's right. CNN is reporting that loyal Morning Joe viewers are vowing to boycott the show now because of this. Because, see, they've created this atmosphere. Joe and Mika have lived and thrived off of dividing us and making this insular little silo of people who are devoted to watching their show, as long as Joe and Mika keep providing what they want, which is them with their hair on fire, screaming that Donald Trump is Hitler. That's what they wanted. They wanted to believe that Kamala Harris was going to win with 49 out of 50 states. They wanted to believe that Trump was going to be done and out of our lives forever, because that's what these two promised them for the last several months. This isn't just about calling Trump Hitler. This is about their lack of credibility. They have broken the trust with their viewers because they lied to their viewers consistently all through the election season. They told their viewers that Kamala Harris was going to win. You never heard that from me on a daily basis about Donald Trump. I told you what was happening. I showed you the polls. I gave you my opinion, but that was it. They don't give an opinion. They deliver an opinion as if it's the truth. And that's the difference. And their viewers woke up Wednesday morning and said, I've been lied to. And that's why they haven't come back. And whoever's still there, now they're screwing them even more. It's a delightful thing to watch. And let's not forget, exactly the kind of content Joe and Mika were providing. This was just 2 months before Election Day, less than 2 months before Election Day. This was Joe and Mika's assessment of Trump, of the Republican Party, of you, anyone who voted for Donald Trump. This is what they fed their viewers just 6 weeks ago.
Do you not call it a threat to democracy when Donald Trump says that he wants to execute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs for treason? Is that not a threat? Saying that your vice president deserves lynching, saying that to your legal counsel on January 6th, is that not a threat to democracy? Undermining Americans' confidence in voting? When you know, because the Wall Street Journal editorial page has been very clear. And I will say, have done the right thing repeatedly, calling out Donald Trump's lies when it comes to widespread election fraud. Is that not a threat to democracy? What exactly is a threat? What rises to the threat of democracy that we have ever seen in America since the Civil War, if what Donald Trump has done over the past 4 years does not? Please, give us the permission structure. I know you're desperate for a permission structure not to vote for Kamala Harris and to get people to vote for Donald Trump. Anti-Trumpism, it is something. If they gave out gold medals for it, you'd get it. You would. But please, tell me. And this is a question Bill Maher was asking this weekend correctly. If this is not a threat to American democracy, what we have seen over the past 4 years, and if that is somehow hate speech that is riling up violent rhetoric, please tell me. Define for me, what is a threat to American democracy? It's certainly not people going around speaking out against January the 6th. It's certainly not people going out speaking out about a presidential candidate and a former president saying he wants the chairman of the Joint Chiefs executed because he was insufficiently disloyal.
All right. I don't want to waste your time with more of this, but that's a good sampling of what the viewers were getting. And here's a perfect example of him expressing his hyperbolic opinion and passing it off as truth. Donald Trump never called for the execution of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, and it had nothing to do with insufficient loyalty. He did mention that in other eras, Milley would be tried for treason. And why? Because General Milley admitted that during the presidency, he reached out to his counterpart in China and said, don't worry, if Donald Trump ever calls for an attack on your country, I'll warn you ahead of time. Now, that's an absolute 100% fact. That's what General Milley said he did. He let a potential enemy on this planet know that if Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, constitutional commander-in-chief, ordered the military to strike China, Milley would forewarn them of the strike. Now, you may not like that Donald Trump hears that and says, hey, that's kind of treasonous behavior. But there's a reason why Joe Scarborough does not share with his viewers the actual facts. Instead, Joe Scarborough says he called for the execution of General Milley because he was disloyal. I guess that's a fact, I suppose, if you want to shoot it through Joe Scarborough's warped view of the world. I gave you the facts. He gave you his version of the facts. I'll let you come up with the truth. But you see, Joe Scarborough doesn't let his audience have that same luxury. And that's what's broken over there. That being said, I may surprise you, but I'm actually glad they went down and talked with Trump. And I'm glad Trump took the meeting. I know there's a lot of people who say that Trump shouldn't have taken the meeting. He should have told him to go pound sand. He should have told him, screw you after everything you've done for me. Last thing I'm going to do is throw you a lifeline and try to save your ass. No, I get it. I get it. I do. And my initial instinct, one little creature that jumps up on my shoulder and whispers in my ear, told me that too. But I've learned over the years to stop and pause for a minute and listen to the other angel on my ear. And I pictured Joe and Mika going down to Mar-a-Lago to talk to Donald Trump in a much more microcosmic way. I thought about so many of us going to see our grandparents in 10 days for Thanksgiving. I thought about so many of us inviting our children to our house 10 days from now for Thanksgiving. I've thought about all of the posts on social media that I've seen from people saying, what do I do? What do I do this Thanksgiving with this person in my family who has been acting this way and saying these things and demonizing us? And the fact of the matter is, we do need to heal. We do need to get over this. We need to figure it out as a nation. We need to figure out microcosmically in our families, and we need to figure it out in a macro way as well. That doesn't mean giving in. It doesn't mean compromising. It doesn't mean letting the other side have their way. It doesn't mean rewarding people for being horrible to us. It doesn't mean any of that. It means putting a pause on all of it and saying, we do have one thing in common. We're Americans. We're members of the same family. When all is said and done, we still have to hold on to that. And if Joe and Mika having a meeting with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago actually advances the ball, if it stands as a representation to people that, well, if they can go talk to Trump, maybe I can let grandma over. As long as we just talk about, things that we all agree on. Turkey is great. We call it stuffing, not dressing. And the Detroit Lions are the greatest professional football team this year. Then yeah, we can have a Thanksgiving. So forgive me if I'm naive or a bit of a Pollyanna. But part of me wants to embrace this story and hold on to that aspect of it. And I'm fully prepared to be disappointed. I promise you. Especially with these two. Oh, by the way, while we're walking down memory lane and showing some flashbacks of Joe Scarborough, that last one you just saw was from just about 6 weeks ago. Let's go even further back, because I have a feeling he's going to be rather unhinged when it comes to the confirmation process of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And of course, they're going to focus on what people are portraying as Kennedy's position on vaccinations and any correlation or connection or even presumed connection or suspected connection between the extra schedule of vaccinations and the extra loads of vaccinations that children are getting at a very young age, and what appears to be an increased diagnosis of autism over the last 25 years, right? I mean, that's a thing. It's a thing that Kennedy has been talking about, and it's a thing that they're going to hold against him during the confirmation hearings. And I'm sure Kennedy will welcome this. He's like, I've been wanting to have a conversation about this for decades. Thank you. If you want to make that about my confirmation, let's have it. So I think it's instructive to take a long walk down memory lane and see how then midday MSNBC host Joe Scarborough, before Morning Joe and before he had an affair with his coworker, Mika Brzezinski, I'm sorry, are we not supposed to talk about that part? Oh, well, let's face it. He and Mika started working together, and it was a Me Too situation with a happy ending. At least so far, it's a happy ending. Who knows how it might end up? Trust me, the HR department over at MSNBC has sort of dodged a bullet on this one. That said, the old Joe Scarborough had his own show on MSNBC, and he interviewed a very youngish-looking Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about this very issue. I want you to watch how that conversation went on this archive video that was discovered and posted on social media. And also notice one other thing. The very same arrogance, I know better than everyone else attitude that Joe Scarborough brings to the table, even though this is a very different Joe Scarborough.
My son, born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger.
The generation,
something happened in 1989.
Exactly. The generation, what happened was the vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal and this mercury, and nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot. under EPA guidelines, he would have to be 275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
And yet we're just constantly pumping our kids with these vaccines.
Right, and what happened was that in 1988, 1 in every 2,500 American children had autism. Today, 1 in every 166 children have autism, and plus 1 in 6 children have other kinds of learning disorders, other kinds of neurological disorders, speech delay, language disorders, ADD, hyperactivity, that all seem to be connected, that are all connected, the science shows are all connected to autism.
You know, Bobby, what we've always found, you and I could debate 1,000 different issues, whether it's Terry Schiavo or the environment. I think would agree on the environment. But in this case, you've got the federal government coming in saying, well, there's no good science. And of course, in politics, science always gets diluted. Why hasn't the federal government stepped up and worked more? Because listen, Bobby, I can't prove it tonight. You can't prove it. But intuitively, you look at the spike, you look at what happened with the Marisol, there is no doubt in my mind, maybe it's 2 years from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, maybe it's 10 years from now, we're going to find out that the Marisol causes, in my opinion, autism.
You know what?
I think Kennedy should use that clip in his confirmation hearings and bring in Joe Scarborough as a character witness. That's astounding, isn't it? Isn't it? And I'm not here to take a position one way or the other on this. I'm the father of a child on the autism spectrum, by the way. And yes, I've been deeply, deeply involved in researching and reading and investigating all of this stuff. I have. And it's not for me to tell you one way or the other what I think, nor is it Joe Scarborough's position to do that either. I just find it remarkable that Joe Scarborough is also this Joe Scarborough. And something tells me that he's going to take a different position on this issue. Oh, also, one other item of note, for those of you who don't know the history of it, thimerosal, the mercury-based additive that was put into vaccines for thanks to Robert Kennedy's advocacy back in the day and segments like that you just witnessed, it has been removed from most of the childhood vaccines, if not all of them at this point, I believe, thanks to research done on it. And there's still no definitive scientific link to autism. I don't mean to suggest that there is, but they don't use it anymore. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can exhale. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing. One of the most significant is our national debt. Fact is, our nation is broke. And that debt is a house of cards that can't quickly be dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings. A lot of things are out of your control, even out of Trump's control. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. Control what you can control, your money. Birch Gold Group, they can help you. They'll help you convert an IRA or 401k that you already have into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is, it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Text Larry to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. And right now, through Black Friday, you'll receive a free 1-ounce Silver Eagle for every $5,000 purchase. That's cool. Diversify your savings with Birch Gold. Text Larry, Larry, to 989898. Claim your eligibility for free silver today.